In the winter of 1807, a single man controlled the fates of 40 million Europeans. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte, and he had discovered something that kings and conquerors before him had missed entirely. Power wasn't just about armies or bloodlines. It was about money, markets, and the psychology of submission. While his enemies saw a short Corsican with delusions of grandeur, they failed to recognize the calculating economist who was rewriting the rules of empire itself. The greatest lie ever told about Napoleon is that he was simply a military genius. The truth is far more unsettling. He was history's first modern dictator who understood that true conquest happens not on battlefields, but in counting houses, trade routes, and the minds of men. Every cannon he fired was backed by a financial calculation. Every crown he placed was secured by economic leverage. Every enemy he crushed was first bankrupted, then defeated. When Napoleon seized power in 1799, France was a financial wasteland. The revolution had destroyed the old order, leaving behind chaos, worthless currency, and a treasury emptier than a beggar's pocket. Most leaders would have seen insurmountable problems. Napoleon saw opportunity. He understood that chaos creates the perfect conditions for those bold enough to impose order, and that desperate people will trade their freedom for the promise of stability. His first move wasn't military, it was financial. Napoleon established the Bank of France, centralizing monetary control under his personal influence. He standardized currency, making trade predictable and profitable. But here's where his genius reveals itself. He didn't just create wealth, he weaponized it. The Bank of France became his war chest, funding not just armies, but a massive network of spies, bribes, and propaganda that stretched across Europe. Think about the psychology at work here. Napoleon understood that people don't follow leaders, they follow their own interests. Give a merchant profitable trade routes, and he'll defend your empire with his life. Give a banker stable currency, and he'll finance your wars. Give common soldiers regular pay and plunder, and they'll march across continents for you. Napoleon didn't buy loyalty, he made loyalty profitable. But money alone doesn't build empires. Napoleon's true weapon was his understanding of human nature itself. He studied how people think, how they react to fear, how they respond to hope. He discovered that most humans are predictable animals who will choose the familiar oppression over uncertain freedom every single time. This wasn't cynicism, it was cold calculation. Consider the continental system, Napoleon's economic blockade of Britain. On the surface, it appeared to be trade warfare. In reality, it was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. By controlling what goods entered and left European ports, Napoleon made entire nations economically dependent on his approval. Merchants, manufacturers, and governments found themselves in a position where opposing Napoleon meant financial ruin. He had turned commerce itself into a chain of submission. The psychology was brilliant and terrifying. Napoleon created a system where resistance wasn't just militarily dangerous, it was economically suicidal. He understood that people will endure almost any political oppression if their material conditions remain stable or improve. This is why his empire lasted longer than anyone predicted, and why, even today, some Europeans remember Napoleon not as a tyrant but as a modernizer. Napoleon's approach to conquered territories reveals another layer of his genius. He didn't simply loot and pillage like previous conquerors. Instead, he implemented what he called the continental system of standardized laws, currencies, and administrative structures. This wasn't generosity, it was psychological warfare on a continental scale. By making life more predictable and bureaucratically efficient, he made French rule seem like progress rather than occupation. He established the Napoleonic Code, a legal framework that still influences legal systems today. But examine it closely and you'll see its true purpose, creating a society where individual ambitions serve state power. The code promoted meritocracy over aristocracy, allowing talented individuals to rise through Napoleon's system. This gave millions of Europeans a stake in his success. Why rebel against an empire that offers you opportunities your birth would never have allowed? The financial mathematics of Napoleon's empire were staggering. At its peak, he controlled customs duties from Hamburg to Rome, tax revenues from Madrid to Warsaw, and tribute payments from dozens of puppet states. But more importantly, he controlled the flow of information about wealth. His propaganda machine consistently emphasized the prosperity his rule brought, while his secret police ensured that dissenting economic opinions disappeared along with their authors. Napoleon understood something that modern leaders often forget. Power is ultimately about controlling narratives, not just armies. He flooded Europe with newspapers, pamphlets, and proclamations that portrayed French rule as inevitable progress toward prosperity and stability. He made resistance seem not just futile, but backward-looking and economically destructive. But perhaps Napoleon's most chilling innovation was his use of psychological leverage against other rulers. He didn't just defeat enemy armies, he humiliated enemy leaders in ways that destroyed their credibility forever. When he forced the Holy Roman Emperor to dissolve his 1,000-year-old empire, Napoleon wasn't just redrawing maps. He was demonstrating that old sources of legitimacy were powerless against new forms of organized force. The downfall came when Napoleon's system encountered something he couldn't calculate: the Russian winter and the awakening nationalism that his own success had paradoxically created. By showing that empires could be built on merit rather than birth, he had inadvertently taught his subjects that political arrangements were changeable, not eternal. The same psychology that built his empire eventually destroyed it. Yet, even in defeat, Napoleon's legacy reveals the enduring power of his methods. Today's global economy operates on principles he pioneered: centralized monetary systems, standardized commercial laws, and the use of economic interdependence to maintain political stability. Modern leaders still use his playbook, creating systems where resistance to authority becomes economically irrational. The tech billionaires who build platforms that become too essential to abandon. The central bankers who make entire economies dependent on their decisions. The political leaders who promise prosperity in exchange for liberty. They are all walking paths Napoleon mapped out 2 centuries ago. He proved that in a modern world, whoever controls the flow of money and information controls the flow of human behavior itself. Napoleon Bonaparte wasn't just a conqueror who happened to understand economics. He was an economist who happened to conquer. His true genius lay in recognizing that in a world where survival depends on complex systems of trade, finance, and information, traditional forms of power become obsolete. The future belongs to those who can make themselves indispensable to the very systems that sustain human life, and that perhaps is the most unsettling lesson of all. We like to believe that tyranny announces itself with jackboots and bayonets. But Napoleon taught us that the most effective oppression comes disguised as efficiency, prosperity, and progress. The chains that bind most tightly are the ones we forge ourselves, link by profitable link, until we discover that our prosperity has become our prison and our liberator has become our master.